On today's episode, we have a really interesting conversation that we often get asked about, and people will sometimes write in and ask us this question or talk about this in saying that they don't feel like they are attracted to their spouse anymore. So we're going to dive into this a little bit, talk about physical attraction, emotional attraction, and just see if we have some good, sound biblical advice for those of you out there who feel you might be in this situation. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. Rusty and Heather Bryant are here with you, and we're glad to be back hanging out for another week and getting to talk with you. And can we just open this episode up and just say we are so thankful for our listeners. We have our podcast, you guys that listen, you're so kind and gracious to us, and we get lots of feedback and people just responding and appreciating the effort that we put in to come and meet with you every week. And so we are just grateful for you. So thank you for being listeners. And, we say this quite often. And again, we don't ask this because we want the pats on the back or whatever, but we know that on these different podcast apps, specifically Spotify and Apple Podcasts, when you rate us, which you just have to kind of scroll until you find, which is not hard, but just find the little stars and click on that star. And the reason why that helps us so much is because it puts our podcast in front of more people. So when they're searching for it, or searching for marriage advice or help for your marriage or just marriage, Christian marriage, ours will pop up there. And so we want to be able to help as many people as we can. So thank you for doing that. If it's one of the platforms that allows you to leave a review, we would love for you to do that as well. That just helps us a lot. All right. Housekeeping over. Let's talk. All right, so Heather, why don't you, I kind of set us up with a little bit in the intro, but why don't you kind of set us up a little bit more? Because look, we talk a lot about our survey. If you've never taken our survey, go to our website, theredeemedmarriage.com. Down at the very bottom, you can click on survey, and it gives you a chance to kind of chime in and give us a little bit of information, but really it helps us with topics and things, resources that we can use in the future or that we can create in the future. It just tells us kind of what you are in need of. And so it's very helpful to us. Well, we get some people from time to time that talk about this subject, or at least request this subject. And we've had people that actually write in and ask us specifically about this.
So we, when we did the survey, I actually think we had a couple of people, 2 to 3, that mentioned this topic, but there were some other topics that we had 50 people mention, or, more than that. And so this was one of those that kind of got tucked away and was like, okay, that's a good thought for us to do one on, but then we never, tackled it. Tackled it. And not too long ago, we journeyed with a couple that was having an issue with this, that the wife was just not attracted to her husband physically anymore. And then we had a couple of people write in recently about this same topic. And I was like, I think that maybe only 2 or 3 people put it on the survey, but it must be something a little bit bigger than what we have, or what we thought in our minds. So just because God keeps bringing this to the forefront of my mind by, having people ask questions about it, and me kind of digging in and doing some research and what does Scripture say about this topic, just makes it something that I wanted to talk about tonight. So I think you did a great job introing it, because I think that this can go both ways. It's not just a wife not being attracted to her husband anymore. There may be husbands out there that are not attracted physically to their wives anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so what? I mean, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
That if you're not attracted physically to your spouse anymore, then that can cause all sorts of problems. I mean, obviously, the biggest one is sexual intimacy. You're not going to have that as often if you aren't attracted to your spouse. It kind of puts a roadblock there.
Yeah, this is a good topic, and the reason why maybe we haven't tackled it before is because obviously you guys know that our story and the things that we learned from our story, we come and we share, and it's all very personal. And this one is one of those topics that's not it's not as personal to us because we haven't dealt with it.
Yeah.
At least not to this extreme, and I say it that way because it's when you think about attraction to somebody, you're thinking about, you immediately go to physical attraction.
That's right.
But I think there's layers of this too, of just like when your spouse does something to you that then all of a sudden, or is living in a way that is not attractive to you. Maybe that's not just looks and physical attraction or whatever that might be, but then it becomes this deeper, there's something emotional there. There's something that has broken down. Maybe it's broken trust or whatever. And so then all of a sudden you're not attracted to them anymore. So that's real too.
Because you hurt me. Or
Yeah. So like in our case, we journeyed through infidelity. And so, there was a time that I'll just say it, what Heather's actions were so harmful and grotesque to me that it was that I was not attracted. Like I did not want to connect with you emotionally or physically because of what had happened. So I just think that I don't know that we can even touch on every part of this, but in this one episode, because there are layers, like I said.
Right.
But I think that we just need to acknowledge that there's a lot of people out there that they're just going, I don't know what to do because I really don't find myself attracted to my spouse anymore. And that could be the husband not attracted to the wife not attracted to the husband. And the reason why there's layers is because it might genuinely be one of those physical things where you're just with your eyes, basically, you're looking and you're like, this ain't what I signed up.
Right.
This is
Right.
you're not the same person, obviously, which we're going to talk about.
Sure.
But then I do think that there's also somebody might say that, and maybe it's not even really a physical thing. It's just like, I'm not attracted to you anymore. Like there's no chemistry. There's no chemistry.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. And before you say the next thing, I think there's even another layer, and we might have to revisit this another time, is when you don't find yourself attractive.
Yeah.
I battled that when you were saying we don't find this one isn't just as personal for us because we haven't battled it. I've definitely battled not feeling attractive, like myself. And so therefore I didn't want to be physical with you because I was embarrassed or ashamed. And that had a lot to do with my surgery that I had and some weight that I put on. And I think that's a very real.
And you could even be at a point where you're like, there's no way that my spouse could find me attractive.
That's right.
And so I'm not attracted.
Yeah.
You went through 17 rounds of chemo and had no hair, and which, I wasn't kidding when I was like, this is kind of sexy. And but I genuinely, there was never a time that I was not attracted to you. But I think that plays a part into it, because I do think that we can speak from how did we stay attracted to each other even through, there was an affair, then there was the cancer, and so
no hair, double mastectomy, sunken chest.
Yeah.
A lot of the physical things that I would say are important for beauty were we're wiped away.
And I do think that because of that, maybe we do have probably even more than before we started talking about. I mean, before we actually were voicing it, I'm like, man, maybe we do have even a better reason to speak on this topic. Because there are people out there that will come to us and they'll say, you don't understand. Like, and yes, there is some truth in that.
And aspects of it that we don't.
But at the same time, I think some people go, oh, well, it's, you don't understand because there's health issues. And yeah, you're right. We don't know it all, but we have journeyed through that side of it in a way.
Yeah.
All right. So here, like, I got lots of questions. When we started talking about this the other day, you said some things that were just like really good and eye-opening to me, and stuff that I don't know that I've ever really thought about that much. And again, maybe I've never really thought about it because like I am attracted to you. And even though we went through the 2 hard seasons, like, I have stayed attracted to you.
You didn't have to dig deep,
right,
to stay there,
right. But I do have some questions, and maybe you can get your points in as I'm kind of asking these questions, but because you did some research on this and have done some thinking about it. But like, I'm wondering, like, for the person that's out there I mean, is it possible for somebody to be out there thinking, man, I really do love my spouse. Like, I genuinely love my spouse, but I'm not attracted to them. Like, is that possible?
Sure. I think so. And the reason why I say that is because, I say sure when you're looking at the physical. Because I definitely think that, well, first of all, we all age. I mean, there are lots of, like, even for somebody who just ages gracefully,
right,
and naturally, there's lots of things that happen in the aging process that we can't stop as much as people try to stop. There's going to be wrinkles, which I think are just badges of honor because it means you've walked through some stuff, and and like you mentioned with health, I mean, hormones, and thanks for that, dog. If y'all heard that, that
shook
was just
in the microphones.
But you have people who, because of health issues like hormones and things like that, they start gaining weight and have trouble with losing that weight. And I think that's a very natural part of your metabolism goes down, and it's just part of it. But I think the problem comes when we, and I've, been through seasons like this, and maybe again, where we start to kind of use that as an excuse to not take care of ourselves. So if somebody, and that was a long answer to try to answer your question, but I think that there's a part where aging is natural, and then a part where it's not, where maybe we get a touch of the lazies and, aren't motivated anymore. You put on a few pounds and it's like, oh, well, and you just kind of let yourself go. And I think that starts to affect your spouse, not only because physically looking at you, but also like, why are you not taking care of yourself? Like, am I not important enough for you to try to still be attractive to me, or to try to work to be attractive to me? And so then I think it just kind of compounds, and it gets worse and worse and worse because, you're seeing a physical difference, and then you start, playing mind games with yourself that are like, they don't even care about me anymore because they're not trying hard, or they're not doing things to stay healthy, or to stay. And I'm not just talking about weight. I mean, there's lots of things that can go into that. Being unmotivated to help around the house, or, I mean, all of those things affect the way that you view your spouse. But yes, I think that you can love your spouse and be challenged in finding them physically attractive.
Yeah, but you kind of mentioned there too that I see. I just wonder if they are one and the same, or if they're different, and can they be separated? Because you talked a little bit about, well, first you were talking about the physical thing, because we're admitting that, yes, when you say, hey, I'm not attracted to my spouse, that's just kind of where your mind goes first. But that might not be what everybody's really talking about, because, like I said, well, let me go here first. You started talking about not keeping yourself together, and just, you start putting this to making your spouse think, well, you just don't care. And I battled that with us, because, and it was more because of during the time when you were in this dark season of your life, like, your looks were very important to you.
Right.
And again, that's a topic for another day, because getting into, your mind and what was going on through all of that, which we've talked about a lot. But then, as that season ended, you went through some struggles physically, and then, of course, the cancer and stuff. But even before the cancer, like, there were some thoughts on my part where I was like, hey, why are you gaining weight? Like I'm your thing now,
right?
But I'm not as important. I mean, and like, that's wrong. It was wrong of me to think that way, but it was a feeling, and I've expressed that to you before.
Yeah.
So
and again, I've probably said this 150 times on our podcast. So if this is your first time listening, you'll hear it again. But that thought coming into your head is not the problem. It's what you do with it.
Right.
And that thought coming into your head of saying, well, she sure worked hard and stayed skinny when it was trying to get somebody else's attention. But now that her heart is right, and I'm, she's focusing on me, why it's okay to, and so that thought coming into your head is not wrong. It's okay, what am I going to do with it that matters?
Right.
And taking that captive and making it obedient to Christ, and your thoughts in that. So, like, if these thoughts come into your head as you're listening to this podcast, and you're like, yeah, oh, I've thought that before. That's not the problem. It's the path that you choose to go with that thought that is the problem. And that's what I want to give people some thoughts on how to handle those thoughts well and honoring, instead of letting it lead you into a dark place.
Before you get into that, because this is the meat of it, what you're going to share a little bit. But I want to also say that, because then you started saying, well, it may not even be physically. It may just be they're not doing anything to help. They're not, and that's when, I kind of look at it and I go, man, you're just, man or woman, you're just being a bum.
Yeah.
That's the kind of the way. And I'm like, well, so at that point, it almost becomes, and my question, I guess, to you is, as you've researched this, but is it separate that you can be emotionally unattracted? Is that separate from being physically unattracted, or are they almost one and the same, or do the lines blur? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that, somebody could be eye candy. You know what I'm saying? Somebody could be just a knockout, gorgeous, guy or girl.
The movie Shallow Hal.
There you go. But something like that where the person is beautiful or, just drop dead handsome or whatever, but they're just an absolute bum.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're not attracted to them.
Right.
I mean, I think about movie stars. I mean, how many freaking movie stars get divorced?
Right.
All of them almost.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, how did that happen?
Right.
Well, it probably
because y'all
wasn't.
are two gorgeous people.
And it probably wasn't because all of a sudden they weren't attracted to each other physically. It was the emotional part of it. So I guess I'm saying all that because I want us to be able to wrap those things a little bit together and say, it really doesn't. I mean, it's not really the way the world sees you as far. I mean, you may not be overweight and slobby and never dress, whatever that your spouse might find physically attractive. It may not even be that, but it's whatever you may be doing that becomes unattractive to your spouse, and it's hard to have that chemistry. So, look, I know, like I said, there's so many layers, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint, exactly what it is. But I think what you kind of have come up with, and some answers, I guess it is. So maybe the listener that's out there, and you're like, okay, well, I've never really said these words to anybody, but I just kind of feel like I'm not really attracted to my spouse, whether that's physical or emotional.
Yeah. Well, and I'll just be honest. When I did, I've loosely said research. I just tried to read through some things about what biblically God tells us about this topic. And really the 90% of what I found is relating more to the physical unattractiveness. Like if you are finding your spouse unattractive physically, because the emotionally, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, they are rude to me, they're not helping out, like that's a whole different battle, I think, to have to fight mentally, and through lots of prayer and through lots of digging in on what God says about that, than not just being attracted to them because they've put on some weight or wrinkled gotten old.
And again, so much of that can just be comparison. I mean, you're just, and that's when, you got to stop playing the comparison game, because there's always going to be out there.
You're getting old too.
That's right. There's always going to be somebody out there that you can look at and go, wow, that person looks nice.
Right.
So it really does become, you're not comparing. But all right, I want you to get into this.
I am, and I'm going to do that now. But I wanted to make sure. I mean, our listeners need to know this. All of this that I found, it's so good and so rich, but it really is mostly on the physical aspect. If you're just not attracted to your